a lot of those difficult problems and those difficult tasks disappear by understanding and appreciating the value of what I'm learning and the
Hmm.
value of the experience that I'm gaining, not about what I'm getting paid for that task.
Corey, Dispension Technologies, welcome onto the show. I've been really looking forward to having you on. One thing is, you're a startup out of the East Coast, out of Nova Scotia. Second thing, you're a hardware software startup. That's always cool because you're creating physical things. That's always a different challenge than, a tech company that launches the software. Been looking forward to having you on. So, Corey, what's happening?
Yeah, hey Ravi, thanks for having me. Really excited to be on the program today. So, yeah, Dispension Industries, we're a life sciences technology company from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and we're really focused on using secure automated kiosks equipped with advanced biometrics to securely distribute restricted products.
Yeah. So a lot to digest there, right? You're trying to create a kiosk system you can place into cities, retail locations, places where sensitive products can be placed in a safe, secure environment that can be accessed by the people who need them, but again, with some verification involved, right? So I was going through your website and you guys have three main things, challenges you're trying to focus on. One, this biometric scanning technology that allows your machine to detect the right person who can get an item, right? That's again regulated and heavily regulated. So make sure it gets the right person. But also, what I like about it is it's a distributed technology, so that you have an overarching idea of the landscape. So if one person goes to one location, tries to take out a prescription, they can go to a different machine, they can go to a different kiosk and or a different retailer and try to use their same prescription and get multiple things. So you have a database over a wider scale. You have a software platform play. You have this hardware that allows to do the scan and get the item to the right person. And then lastly, you have this piece which is for retailers to be able to provide a novel kind of offering in their location. Is that correct? Those are the three kind of verticals.
Yeah, and I think that all comes back to the amount of data that would be available for these retailers and government agencies to better know consumers. So I'll break down each of those components individually. The backbone to Dispension is the automated kiosk technology that we use.
Hmm.
So kiosks are secure, trusted IoT devices, and they are equipped with advanced biometrics and tamper-proof hardware to restrict access to these products, whether it's cannabis, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, lottery and gaming, or nicotine products, to people who are either A, identified as patients, or B, identified as a legal age consumer for retail products. So our
Hmm.
technology is being deployed in different verticals for different purposes, but primarily we're focused on using automated kiosks and advanced biometrics to support the distribution challenges and really protect public health and safety with a harm reduction lens.
Hmm.
Um, the second aspect is the software and this ecosystem that we're creating, this secure ecosystem where participants can access different machines across the network, but they couldn't access more than they're legally allowed. So in the case of a patient could access their medication from one of three machines, but once they access it from that location, they're unable to access more until the next day. Or in
Hmm.
for example, with cannabis, retail customers could purchase up to 28 grams of cannabis from our kiosk, but wouldn't be allowed to purchase more at a different retail location. So it's really about this integrated ecosystem where data is transferred across the network and really housed in an analytics database.
Hmm.
Then as far as how that data is being used, we are really positioning this to support the public health and safety policies around distributing these products, and we're using this data for scientific, medical, and advertising purposes.
Yeah. Um, just a quick word about the kiosk, right? So is this more like a kiosk, like you see at McDonald's, where you make the order, but then there's a back end system, aka retailer, that actually vends the item out, or is it a vending machine built into it as well, like with a dual purpose? Like, can it self operate?
Yeah, so this is a vending machine on steroids. Uh,
Mm,
we've advanced the vending machine to be a smart connected device, and as you've seen probably in Asia, there are a number of different vending machines for different purposes. Some of them make pizza, some of them still sell steak, and our technology and our verticals are really focused on restricted products and being a global leader in harm reduction around these restricted products. So if you want to think about it in a very simple way, it's a sophisticated vending machine that actually contains all of the products that consumers are trying to access, but it provides more safety and security for the retailer and for government agencies who are trying to distribute these products by using advanced biometrics to age gate consumers or identify patients in a medical application.
hmm Yeah, like I just got a flash of memory. One of my friends, Praveen, he was a former VP at Tesla, and he was on social media putting up this. They had at Tesla's the food station this vending machine that made ramen, but
Mm.
the provider of the vending machine, right? Like their Instagram page, they can they describe themselves as an IoT blockchain artificial intelligence company, right? And it's like, okay, you're making ramen, but why do you have blockchain and AI involved into it? Like, what are you doing here? But and that was a running joke. And we have this kind of like startup landscape where you're overachieving by putting too much technology into something that is does like a very simple thing. But in your case, you're going after a very not just regulated but very vulnerable population, right?
Mhm.
You're dealing with vulnerable people, you're dealing with regulations, you're allowing for a more sophisticated approach to distributions of these kind of products. So the amount of technology, or the amount of I guess, effort that goes into securing this environment must be immense. Like, can you talk a little more about your journey? Let's cut this down. Like, where did you start from, and how does it begin?
Yeah, and you're right. We're going after a sophisticated industry with a lot of regulatory barriers and compliance standards, and that really brings us back to when this first started. So in 2017, I was having a conversation with a few buddies about the impending cannabis legalization framework here in Canada, and we were kicking the tires on different ways that we could hypothetically get involved in the industry as entrepreneurs. I had a background in clean tech and did a lot of business development work in that world for quite a while, and I felt like it wasn't exciting enough for me, and I wanted to get into something that was more hands-on and that could really see a lot of growth. And during the conversation about cannabis legalization, the idea of vending machines was brought up. And I thought about it, and, that's cool. Started thinking about it more and did some research and really figured that in order for a vending machine to distribute cannabis securely and for it to be regulated and compliant with the objectives of the legalization framework, it would need to have some kind of authentication system that wouldn't
Mm,
allow access to youth and that wouldn't allow access to people who are not able to produce identification. And so around 2018, we really started to kick things into high gear. And um, one day I met Dr. Mark Tyndall, who had this idea of using vending machines to distribute opioids as a scalable way to reduce the impact of the overdose crisis. And thinking about how we've positioned this for cannabis and how it could be applied in this other direction, I had kind of a revelation that we weren't just building technology for a specific vertical. We were building a platform that could distribute restricted products using advanced biometrics in a number of different verticals. And so the the company started to grow based on this concept that we were building a platform that could securely distribute a product using the similar principles across all of the verticals, and that includes biometrics, tamper-proof security, bulletproof glass, bolted to the floor, all of these things that government agencies care about, no matter what product you're distributing. It's all about safety, security, and oversight. So looking at the cannabis regs, and then the Narcotics Control Act and all these different legislative documents, the theme was very similar, that there needed to be traceability, oversight, and compliance. And from there, we started to explore other opportunities in different verticals. And through this relationship with Dr. Mark Tyndall, we ended up building a kiosk that was specifically suited for distributing opioids as part of a safe supply program called the MySafe Project. The MySafe Project was established in late 2019 in December, where we deployed a kiosk in Vancouver in the downtown east side to distribute a prescribed opioid to people who are at risk of overdosing on street fentanyl and different contaminated substances. And so this project allowed us to validate our technology in a market and really support the challenges of low barrier access for a safe supply of drugs so that people wouldn't overdose. And what came out of it was really that participants liked a destigmatized way to use and access these medications. And I think that principle applies to all of these industries, that if a consumer has the option to use an unattended solution to get their products, that they're more likely to use that service. Even for cannabis, there's still a lot of stigma attached with consumers talking to people about products that they don't really feel comfortable talking about. And so the unattended solution has really improved the user experience with restricted product access.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting part about how society has so rapidly changed, right? Especially with the legalization in Canada, right? Like of cannabis. Now we're looking into the decriminalization and eventual legalization of psychedelics in research, right? I think Kevin O'Leary invested into MindMed, and that made moves. Like a super conservative like Kevin O'Leary, who's like investing into MindMed, is that pushing psychedelic drugs as for therapy. It really opens up and changes suddenly our worldview, right? We have the past 80 years of don't do drugs kind of movement, right? These drugs are completely bad, and giving a monopoly to the actual industry, right? The drug and manufacturing industry to actually to treat people with more manufactured drugs, if you will, right? And we're restructuring ourselves, and I really enjoy this conversation that a lot became more and more open about how these things that grow out of the ground, are being brought back into our society to metamorphosize ourselves, to fix ailing solutions. So let's a little bit about that. I know you talked about opioids and the more regulated things like that. What are other verticals? You talked about lottery tickets. You talked about these things. What are the different things that you can have on your platform here, right? And is it really truly omnichannel? Is it you can have one machine meant for one thing, or can have a multitude of things running behind it? How could it function?
Yeah, and so we've broken our market verticals into Medtech and Vice Tech. So the Medtech verticals include, pharmaceutical distribution, harm reduction strategies. We're working with First Nations to reduce, the risks and the challenges of distributing pharmaceuticals and offering, medical care. So you can integrate a virtual virtual care platform into our technology, and you can actually communicate directly with physicians and pharmacists through the platform. So it really expands access to healthcare services for communities as well. We have applications in elder care and corrections, using this technology to distribute medication and prescriptions on a daily basis in a secure way, specifically in the corrections space. A lot of inmates have prescriptions for various medications. Some of them are dealing with acute illnesses such as HIV and Hep C. So adherence and retention to treatment programs is very important. And so how do you track people's retention to these programs? Well, you can do that by using biometrics and kiosks in order to distribute these products and do it securely. So, in a prison, people go to a pharmacy within that facility on a regular basis, and you can actually reduce risk to frontline workers and improve the experience for that patient by using automated kiosks. And then in the device tech space, we're going after, as we talked about, the cannabis industry, providing a scalable solution to reduce the impact of the black market and provide access to legal cannabis in all corners of the country by using low-cost automated kiosks. These kiosks are networked together in real time. You can provide direct information to the consumer about products that they're interested in purchasing. So it's also an education platform for products in a retail setting. We're also pursuing opportunities in the alcohol beverage space. You talk about COVID and how COVID has impacted the world and how people watch sports and live venues. Well, the future will, the stadium of the future will have automated kiosks to reduce face-to-face contact and reduce congestion in the concourse and really provide people with a new purchasing experience. So, we have machines that are being developed to dispense beer and other beverages. And then we're also looking at some opportunities within the convenience, the C-store space, where convenience stores are trusted to sell all kinds of products. They're trusted to sell lottery tickets, cigarettes, alcohol, and in some places like Newfoundland, cannabis as well. So, why not put all of those products within a safe, secure environment and store it in a space in the store that's not taking up prime real estate in the front counter? A lot of staff are under pressure to identify people accurately, and using our technology, we take that onus off the staff and actually improve the flow, the traffic flow within that store, and you take the risk away from people who might not be adequately trained to actually identify people and make sure that they are of legal age to purchase the products. So there's a lot of ways that you can deploy this technology within existing infrastructure, whether it's a convenience store, a hospital, a cannabis retailer, or even a medical clinic. So we're really focused on pursuing opportunities in all these verticals. There is quite a bit of opportunity out there, and we have been accused of trying to boil the ocean, but I think at the end of the day, we have a platform that can be modified in a very cost-effective way to apply to various verticals, and so we've been pursuing opportunities in all of them.
Yeah. What I like about you is you guys are solving very complex problems in a lot of different verticals. I like the idea of vice tech. I've never actually heard that term, vice tech, right? The idea that like that stigma exists on the vices that we all have, and I think almost every human has a vice. It could be an addiction to sugar or coffee, or it could be something more illicit, and and that stigma around that, like there are certain things that are allowed that we can joke about, like, oh, too much coffee today, right? And that pulls our behavior in a certain direction. It's fine, but the idea that things like human beings by nature, like any other animals, can be addicted to things or can be drawn to things that gives them can hack their reward system and take them over. I think that requires a lot more sophisticated thinking, right? So I like the idea of technology being applied into this, right? Your software side, you talk a lot about this data, pulling the data, right? Can we talk a little more about that data, right? Like what kind of data you're hoping to achieve to pull? Who's it meant for? How will it be stored?
Yeah, the data is quite complex, and to be honest, it's a bit over my head as far as the value of the data and the monetization strategy, and it really is something that we're still working to develop. But the data that we're currently creating through the MySafe project is being used for scientific and medical evaluation purposes. So the data that's coming in from the transactions is the participant ID, the time of day, frequency of use, whether there's weather factors on picking up their medication, the distance from a participant's dwelling to the machine. So there's a lot of interesting metrics that can be drawn and used to better understand substance use and the patterns of substance use. So all of this information that's being collected is stored as per PIPEDA standards. We're currently working on HIPAA compliance as well. So we're very conscious of the value of the data and the way that it has to be handled. We actually have a data privacy and compliance team that's made up of a few former vice presidents of information security at some top tech companies here in Canada. So we do have a plan in place to deal with this data and make sure that it's protected and anonymized. But we haven't fully tapped the value of that data in a retail sense, where you can use that data as a manufacturer to better understand what products consumers are using in real time. Essentially, you can use that as a retailer to better understand what products consumers are drawn to, and for advertising purposes. So we think that the amount of data that is being generated by these kiosks will allow for all kinds of new insights based on that direct consumer correlation. The biometrics tie people directly to the products that they consume. So exactly what's going on at all times, and you can use that data to understand consumer trends for all kinds of different purposes.
Yeah, I think that'll be really interesting data to pour through. Would the end product, like the data, be provided to like regulators, or would it be like Health Canada, think tanks who look into this? Like, who would be like end proprietor of this data?
Yeah, currently we're working with universities on evaluation of the data for our health project. I don't want to divulge too many details yet, but we're careful with who has access to it. It's being used for medical and scientific purposes at the moment, but it would be provided to regulators or government agencies for health studies. It would be provided to retailers and manufacturers of products, and even consumers to understand how their data is being used. We want the consumer to have the option to opt in or out, and to benefit from sharing that information about their consumption behaviors. But ultimately, we understand how important it is to maintain the privacy of that information. We are consumers ourselves, and we've been using a lot of apps over the years. I'm sure you have, as have I, and we never really know what's being done with our data. And so we're trying to understand it from a consumer's perspective. How can we incentivize them to allow us to understand consumption patterns better?
No. Okay, cool. Let's step back from the company. Let's talk about the founder yourself. Did you grow up in an environment where this was like a necessary need? I grew up in Scarborough, right? It's a suburb of Toronto, but not really a suburb. It's more like an inner city kind of environment where there was a huge problem with violence and drugs and growing up, right? It was a very turbulent time. the early 2000s in Scarborough, and even in the 90s. And man, I remember like in Ontario, all the alcohol is sold by the government, right? With LCBO and with Beer Star. And I remember like me and my friends, we started buying alcohol when we were 16. We looked old enough, had a wispy little beard, and we got along with it. And it was just so prominent. Like everyone drank, everyone had access to things, right? Cigarettes, all that kind of stuff. Like you're growing up, right? All these substances were around, all these negative influences around. There's always older people hanging around high schools, with all these different supply of things readily available, right? And all that influence is there. What I love about today's society is like, yeah, we talk about our youth now are overly regulated, right? Like they're put in this environment where like there's cameras everywhere and there's all this kind of individuality taken out because it's too structured. But at the same time, they're safer than they ever were, right? The school's a lot safer. We have a peek through social media into what they're into and what they're doing, right? But going back to how you grew up, like, what was that look like?
Yeah, well, I spent some time in Scarborough as well. Not when I was growing up, but yeah, I understand the dynamic of an inner city. Growing up in Halifax, in Dartmouth, actually, the dark side, as it's referred to, we had similar issues. Not on such a large scale, but there were people pressuring their peers to consume alcohol at a young age and to smoke a joint and do ecstasy, and so there was always that influence of unregulated products being peddled by peers, and it's funny, if you think back to when people were buying cannabis from their buddy down the road or from the kid at school. It was just, I want to buy some weed. It was never, I want to buy some with this terpene profile and this many, this percentage of THC and CBD. So it's really changed a lot. It's become a lot more scientific, and we understand these products a lot better. But I think the need for distribution system for these products has always been there, but the technology maybe didn't exist to allow for 100% verified, unattended transactions of these restricted products. So people at convenience stores who are operating the store or at the liquor store, they were always beholden to the quality of the ID that was being used by the consumer, or it really comes down to human judgment, and the issue of human judgment still exists, and so this is what we're trying to improve, is the accuracy of age gating consumers and identifying patients, for example, because the technology exists to allow us to do that now. And so the way that we're positioning ourselves is to enhance the age gating systems and enhance the security and compliance and oversight of these products that are being distributed so they can't be accessed by youth. And that might disappoint 16-year-old you, but at the end of the day, we're trying to protect the public and protect the health of our youth. So the technology that we're developing has a real focus on harm reduction and how we can prevent access to youth, how we can reduce the impact of the black market by providing more access to these products in a secure way, and really using a data-driven approach to understand consumption behaviors and the metrics behind these products and who is using them, when they're using them, and what they're using them for.
Yeah. I mean, one of the the dark humor moments about the cannabis industry, right, is a lot of like police officers, high functioning high level police officers who led the charge of of criminalizing following the protocol of criminalizing cannabis use. When cannabis was legalized, they flipped over into the cannabis industries. And I remember that there being a huge public outcry about that. But the such and sudden switch in society, I think in Canada, we have this societal kind of new lens we see things now. Because after, especially something like cannabis, like turned into a legal environment where it's now like, yeah, you can consume it, you even smoke on the street now, it's completely fine. It starts, we're been jump starting this mentality. It's like, what is true? Like that's like a line from Assassin's Creed. It's like nothing is true, everything is permitted,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I think one of the reasons why Canada has become such a hub for innovation is that, there's this line I quote from I think it's Emma Goldberg who talked about this. She said, "No good, every good idea starts off illegal, because the laws are static and it takes a long time to change, and ideas by nature are new and fit new systems, right? So innovation requires a lot of new ideas, come up with ideas. Like look at Uber, look at Airbnb. They were illegal, right? They were focused on gray market. They were capturing gray market and in black market industries, right? Like renting your, going against cabs and not having a medallion, and rent and doing taxi services, to renting out your houses, right? Like a lot of innovation requires you to push the forefront of what been acceptable, or what accepted way of doing things were, right? And I think Canada's suddenly become open to the ideas of like, okay, what else can we push? What else can we change? And as a society, I think we've gotten more open to that. We're seen as a conservative nation, but at the same time, we're very progressive in the way we think. And I think one of the interesting things about, especially your industry and what you're trying to target, is that we're no longer, bumping down the end user. If you have a vice, if you have these kind of afflictions, if you're going to be using, right, we're thinking more of a society like, okay, you know what? If you're going to be doing it, might as well do it safely.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well, like, give us data back so we can figure out, if you're overdoing it, or if you need help, that we can give you that help. I think BC kind of led the charge here with those like needle stations, right? Cool, you're gonna be doing drugs, fine. Here's a place, at least get safe needles. If you're gonna do it here, right? And there's a lot of like the residential outcry being like, you're bringing all these like, drug users into one area, but at the same time, at least they're being safe about it, right? And sorry,
But
go ahead.
just on that point, it's really interesting because the common conception is that we have safe injection sites, so it must be safer. And in some ways it is. And there's a lot of regulatory heavy lifting that was required to allow these safe injection sites to operate, and these needle exchange programs, as you mentioned. But just until recently, people were still committing crimes and purchasing illicit substances, and using them in a safe space. Right? So technically, we're still we're still allowing the behavior to take place to acquire the illicit substance, which then can overdose a person and put stress on first responders and the healthcare system. So by using technology to distribute a safe supply of drugs, a regulated supply, we reduce their dependency on crime, on sex work, and all these horrible things. And then you're not putting people in danger of overdosing and taking up these precious healthcare resources, which we know now are even more fragile now than they have been. So I think the way that you're talking about this, and Canada's progressive approach, it's really, I think, based on common sense and using technology to enhance the ability to distribute these products and make sure that they're secure and they're regulated is part of that common sense approach. And I think with the examples of Airbnb and Uber, like really great examples where the regulations had to catch up to these innovative companies who identified a demand and a need in the market, and then started to implement their model and started to force the regulators and these industries to adopt new policies and new ways of doing things, because the consumer always speaks the loudest. And I think in the example of illicit drugs and the way that Canadians have been using substances over many years, and some people use coffee and some people drink alcohol. Well, some people use opioids and some people use cocaine, and there's a consumer for everything. And if these products are distributed in a more safe, secure, regulated way, then at least you don't have to worry about the risks of organized crime, the risks of overdoses, and all the public resources that go into responding to overdoses rather than preventing them in the first place. So I think with our technology, we're providing a new distribution mechanism for these products, which provides safer, secure access with the data that will allow us to better understand patterns of use and the demographics. So it really is, I think, right in line with what you're saying, that yes, there are regulatory barriers in our industry. Every single vertical has them. I'm sure an investor doesn't want to hear that, but it is true. And so what we're doing is we're aligning ourselves with, very strong supporters in the industry, with partners that are leaders in the space, experts in regulatory compliance. And we're pushing the boundaries because our technology improves lives, it improves safety and security. And we think it's only really a matter of time before this becomes more globally adopted as a way to distribute these products.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I experienced it myself. So my father is actually a former corrections officer, 16 years in the corrections, and super conservative. He's second generation, like army, like British trained commando, like growing up, super harsh stance, badass, scary ass dude, right? When he says no to drugs, it's like you listen, right? Yeah. Growing up, it was like that's a hard no. But like now, he's in his he's turning 60 and he's like everything's legal and he's like, like it'd be kind of fun to own a dispensary. And I'm like, what? Right? Like the rapid shift in like thinking, right? That requires, and I'm like, I'm seeing it from him. Like, this hard stance conservative dude, it's just like, oh yeah, it's legal. It's perfectly normal now. Like, there's no chaos in the streets, right? And the regulation aspect of it has actually made things better, right? We have more insight, we're more control. No longer is there a legal component to it. No longer is there is a gray market or black market feeding off of this, unregulated substance, right? Just cannabis. And I think like that's a main factor of the drug war, right? The fact that we took it as a war on drugs, right? Like, exported from the United States to everyone else, is that we demonize these things, one thing, but it also opened up this idea for criminal enterprises to develop around them, right? And the amount of money just props them up. Right. There was this podcast where one of the biggest crack cocaine dealers was talking about this. Freeway, Rick Ross, right? He was talking about this. He's like, yo, like the whole reason we were able to do this was because of the legal. You can't get it anywhere else. So of course the most badass dudes would who would take the risk, who doesn't care for the consequences, they would go into this and they can make the money, right? And the worse you were, the more violent you were, the more you corner the market. Mm-hmm. So the war on drugs created the violence behind it by empowering the people who are willing to commit violence, by giving them a way to make money off of it, right? And it's such an interesting concept. I like that, especially the psychedelic movement. I mean, I'm really enjoying, right? I was listening to just previously before this, Dr. Carl Hart. He's a neuroscientist who studies the effects of drugs in the brain, but he himself is an avid user of like almost all illicit drugs. He wears T-shirts with the chemical compounds of drugs on them, and he was talking about this, like we have a negative connotation, stereotype that people who use drugs are just deadbeats. Mm-hmm. But whereas there's been historical evidence of like high functioning people who uses these things, right? And I think what's interesting is like, have you heard about there's I forgot the exact term, but McKenna talked about this, right? About mushrooms leading to giving humans the ability to have imagination. So taking mushrooms, like magic mushrooms, allowed the neurochemically different parts of the brain to connect, to give the brain the ability to imagine things that are not there, right? So being able to look at a mountain, like I imagine myself on top of that mountain, that aspect, or like looking at a rock and a stick and be like, oh, if I do this, it can create that, right? That aspect humanity's ability came from ingesting all this, right? And even like if you look at societal patterns of how societies have used substances to like bind themselves together, right? I really enjoy the show Vikings, and in Vikings they have this like once a year event where they go out and they all get messed up on mushrooms and hallucinate, but through that they have this awakening about who they are, and like and it's like built into their culture. And the resurgence of this, of especially mushrooms and psychedelics, is coming out of that region of the world. Again, like that's historically they used it back in the day. There's a culture coming back around this. So I really like where we're heading. The more progressive ideas of like, okay, it's not just black and white anymore. There's like a more of a deeper understanding is required of what's happening in the illicit market, right? What about yourself? Like, what do you see happening?
Yeah, well, I think your perspective is very interesting, and I also did hear that theory about early humans experimenting with psychedelics and kind of developing consciousness and being able to think outside their present, which is really a neat theory. And evolution, all these things that gave birth to us many centuries later. It's very fascinating to think about how we became the way we are. And as far as the substances that people use and the way that the world treats certain things, it just shows that we're kind of getting past this war on drugs era, where a lot of these substances are being recognized for their medical purposes again, whether it's cannabis or psychedelics, even the use of cocaine back in the day as a pain reliever. I mean, they're not. It's that one's not making a comeback quite yet. But on the cannabis and psychedelic space, it really shows that these substances have medical benefits. Whether you're using them to reduce stress or using them to improve mood or reduce the effects of PTSD. I think it's going to be a really interesting, next few decades as not only Canada but other countries start to recognize the benefits and the value of legalizing these substances and using them for maybe the purposes that they've always been meant to be used for, and not looking at them like something that is bad. Obviously, moderation is key, as with anything. And this goes back to the initial conversation about humans being innately addicted to things. It's just something that, is part of human nature. Some people just love football, right? They can't get enough of it. Some people love playing poker. So everyone has their own vices. And I think the fact that some people's vices have been criminalized to a point where it's completely ruined their lives or their families' lives is unfortunate. And now it seems like common sense is prevailing. And if it's not harming someone else, then what's the harm in allowing people to consume these products in a moderated way or in a regulated environment? So I think it comes back to alcohol harms more people and creates more deaths and leads to more violence than anything else that we consume, but yet it's widely consumed. It's allowed to be advertised to a general audience, children included, and it just seems like one of those things that everybody consumes and nobody talks about how much damage it causes. So you could talk about the way that these products are hurting people, but you could also look at how these products can benefit lives. And I think we've really started to understand that more in the psychedelics and the cannabis space, that there is real medical value to these products, and we're starting to learn more about them every day. And the more countries that recognize the benefits, the more countries our technology will be, deployed in to distribute these products. And we're really focused on harm reduction and distributing these products in a safe and secure manner. So, it's all about limiting consumption and preventing people from abusing these substances and providing them with access to a regulated product in
Yeah.
no matter what vertical.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, more than illicit substances, like you're talking about, this is, for anything that's regulated, not just like the illicit stuff, right? So, any kind of regulated product. So, what I like about this is, using some cool tech behind it, right? Your biometric scanner, I think it looks at the veins in your hand, right? Not necessarily just your finger, like your fingerprints. It does a biometric scan of this, right? I know, like, so in Toronto, there was a really famous company called Nimi that really just like right at the beginning of 2013 when the tech scene started, it really blew up out of the University of Toronto. And what they realized was your heartbeat releases an electromagnetic pulse that travels across your skin. And that electromagnetic pulse is so unique to an individual that it's 1,000 times more unique signature than your fingerprint, right? And they built this armband around it where it can read that pulse and then broadcast that. So you can open things, unlock things based off of that the signature that gives it that feeds the armband, which then turns it into code that can send a pulse, electronically to things, like unlock things. And they really kickstarted this like biometric kind of movement. This interest, like, oh man, there's a lot of things going on in your body that can be used to identify you that's different, right? You guys are doing a different methodology. Can you talk a little about your biometrics?
Yeah, the biometric system that we're using, as you mentioned, it looks at the internal vein pattern in a consumer's palm. It uses infrared light to scan your internal vein pattern, and then it extracts that using image processing and turns it into a numeric hash that is encrypted with 256 and very secure and anonymized. And so that technology is very interesting because every single human in the entire world, no matter whether you're identical twins, has a unique internal vein pattern in the palm. And as for the difference between fingerprints and the internal palm vein, is that a fingerprint actually requires physical contact with a reader. It creates a lot of issues because of grease or the issue, maybe your fingers cut or burned or whatever. And this biometric that we use requires an internal vein pattern scan. So it doesn't actually leave the surface of the palm anywhere. It's very anonymized for a consumer. And from a retailer's perspective, it's contactless. So the consumer can walk up, they scan their palm about an inch or two away from the reader, and you don't need to worry about it leaving grease and residue from the fingers. So this technology has been hugely effective for a registered patient group, but we also have other biometric systems that we've been working on integrating into the kiosk that are based on new digital ID technology. There's some document authentication with live facial scan. So all of these technologies have their own place, whether it's in the medical applications or in the retail applications. But we're really concerned about identifying specific people and granting them access to the contents inside the machine. So we have been focused on integrating the top performing biometrics that exist in the world today.
No, undoubtedly. What I like about you is like you personally had to identify, learn a lot about so many different things to do what you do. So from a societal point of view, what's happening, overall, understanding how data works, understanding how to build a hardware startup. There's so much that goes into manufacturing something, sourcing materials. Systemizing the manufacturing process. I know you're working out of you've recently acquired a warehouse. Right, and you're working out of there, but also, understanding this kind of technology, right? Like, what has been your journey so far to acquire this knowledge to get you where you are to be able to launch this thing?
Yeah, it's a longer story. We might have to do a whole episode just on that. But I went to Mount Allison University. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I studied a lot of different things. My parents were both teachers, and I was nurtured with information. I was always asking questions when I was younger, and I didn't really I didn't really like to just do one thing. And so
Mm.
when I left university, I was I was a bit lost, you could
Mm.
say. And so I told my folks I'm going to Toronto, and I packed up all my stuff, took out a small loan, and I drove to Toronto in the summer of I think it was 2009. And when I got to Toronto, I met up with a buddy of mine who I played soccer with, and he said his brother, who was a music producer at the time, needed some help. So I ended up interning in the music industry, and they were major music producers. They were doing stuff for Katy Perry, and they did "Wrecking Ball" by Miley Cyrus and "Good Feeling" by Flo Rida. They were instrumental in starting the weekend. So it was a really exciting time to be in Toronto, and the vibe was crazy, and we were living downtown. But I remember the day that my mentor pulled me aside and said, "The music industry is going like this, and
Mm.
it's getting smaller, and it's being consolidated into fewer hands." And this was when we were still downloading tracks on LimeWire, um, but things were going digital, and the internet was becoming more influential in the music industry. And he said the music industry is contracting, but the clean tech industry is expanding. And that's where the growth is, and that's where the knowledge and the funding from governments and the infrastructure spending, that's where it's going to be. So I want you to learn everything you can about wind power. And
Mm.
so I looked at him, okay, I'll get on that. So I downloaded every document I could find, and I started reading about wind power. And I was the only one out of us that had like a university background. So I was good at reading and writing and, doing reports and this type of thing. Um, and so I started doing some informal consulting on a wind project in Nova Scotia. And one day he came up to me and said, "I want you to learn everything you can about solar energy. It's going to be the next big thing. Ontario just announced these feed-in tariffs, FIT contracts." So I cold called every solar company in Canada. And I ended up meeting this guy at a solar company who said, "I really need some help." And he called me back 10 minutes later and hired me. And from there, I got a crash course in technology from somebody who's a super genius. He went to Wharton after he got like 96 percentile, and it was just like I was in this crazy learning environment um, with these two great mentors. And from there, we started a small clean tech firm called Next Synergy. And
Mm.
I was flying around to different countries, whether it's in the Caribbean or South America. I lived in the Middle East, and I was doing a lot of the work that other people didn't want to do, which was writing business plans, writing market studies, doing investment decks. And so I ended up understanding the businesses better than the people who were hiring me to do the work.
Mm.
And from there, I ended up getting a lot of experience presenting these businesses in front of the UN Development Committee or patriarchs of families, investors, utilities, and government agencies from a very young age. So in my early 20s, and it just translated into understanding technology, understanding business, understanding the components of a business,
Mm.
and understanding what we needed to have in order to establish a business. And then I was in India, and I was getting frustrated because people would pay me to do the work, to tell them how to grow the business or operate the company, but often they wouldn't listen to my conclusions.
Mm.
And it was getting frustrating. It was 53 degrees, sitting in Delhi, and I said, "I'm going home."
Mm.
So I went back to Halifax in 2017, and then a few months or weeks later, I had that conversation that I mentioned at the start with a couple buddies, and from 2017, it just became, what can I grow with my friends and my colleagues into something amazing, and that was Dispension.
Mm.
So my background in being an entrepreneur and working with some great mentors and getting experience around the world, understanding technology and different business customs, really led to the kind of the experience and the the work ethic and the foundational knowledge of business as I started Dispension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's quite a journey, and what's cool about that is like you got access to so many different like paths and opportunities in front of you, but like essentially you're almost paid to like learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're able to
That's right.
acquire knowledge. I mean that's the ideal place you ever want to be, or especially as a young ambitious person, right?
And
And
one quote that I always kept with me, and it was from a really great mentor. He said, "It's not about the value that you're getting paid for the task. It's about the value that you're taking from doing the task."
mm,
And that really stuck with me because it made a lot of those difficult problems and those difficult tasks disappear by understanding and appreciating the value of what I'm learning and the
mm,
value of the experience that I'm gaining, not about what I'm getting paid for that task. And so, these little things, I think they really helped keep the mental strong. And it's really all about having an optimistic mindset where you can persevere through challenging times and really find the good in every hurdle.
yeah.
It's a problem is an opportunity to find a solution and to think creatively and really overcome adversity.
Yeah, I really like that quote myself because a lot of people don't take the time to develop skills or develop like a repertoire, a foundation to themselves so they can charge more. There's a lot of 20 somethings that are making 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. They're like, I just want to get to the next level. I just want to make more and more and more, and they job hop. That our generation's really big on that, but they don't take the time to like develop something that they can utilize, right? Naval Ravikant, co-founder of AngelList, is one of my favorite listens people listen to, and he said this one quote that really stuck with me, right? It's like you are paid proportionally to the problems you solve, and that really really stuck with me, right? So if you're taking a salary and you're performing a certain function, your pay is directly the problem you're solving within that firm, and that firm extracts wealth from all the entire problem it solves. When you own a company, a business, and you take lead in solving a problem in the market space, the income you make from that is directly proportional. The market responds back to you on how much you solve that pain point, right? And how you get around that. And I really like that kind of mentality, right? But again, that goes back to your point. You can only solve things proportionally to your ability to solve them, the skills you have, the knowledge you have, the network you have, and that takes time to develop. And I don't think there's any kind of sophisticated training. This is my biggest problems with like the education system is like there's no entrepreneurial training where it doesn't teach you on a wide level how to develop yourself. Like it
Mm-hmm.
thinks about get a job, get an income, and then move forward in life, have a career, right? But it doesn't say like you want to be here in 10 years, you want to be solving these kind of problems, you want to do this at this level. Okay, how do you systematically build that? How do you take the time to develop a network or develop knowledge, develop deeper knowledge in certain things, skills that can utilize, right? And I think we're moving more closer to that as a society. It's like less jobs, more problem solvers, and we're aiming towards that.
And I think a lot of people are unable to be uncomfortable. And whether that is financial or whether that's being in a challenging environment, a lot of people are conditioned to be happy and paid on time, 9 to 5, forget about it when you get home. Um, but I think comfort kills passion. So if
Mm,
you're comfortable, you're not hungry.
yeah.
And so it really took a lot of uncomfortable, hungry nights for me to gain that perspective that it's not for everyone.
Mm,
And, I would always think, I wish I had more support and more help. Why won't somebody else just, work with me and not expect to get paid? And it's because everybody else is focused on getting paid and saving money and having the kind of the life that is typical of a young
Society. Yeah.
person, yeah, society. And so from my experience, it's always been about the threshold for pain and discomfort has been really key to kind of continuing this journey and not having to worry about having a nice watch or having new clothes or a roof over my head. It was just everything is temporary. And so you're working through these challenging times and these painful times, thinking about the value of what you're doing is going to pay off down the road. And so that's kind of kept me going. Is the difficulties and the challenges are all part of the learning experience. And I think being an athlete and being part of a team and I had to run around the field until we puked when I was young. You get yelled at if you made a mistake and disciplined or whatever. Like I'm sure you're well familiar with being kept in line. And I think some of that has been lost in society, that we're not as open to criticism and adversity. It's I want to have a nice, easy life, and life is not easy. And I think the experiences that I gained when I was a kid, and then translating them through with these mentors and being able to endure hardship with kind of the bigger picture in mind, the long-term vision. It's not just about today; it's about tomorrow, and putting in the kind of the hard miles today is going to be rewarding in the future. And so that's really the mentality that I've had over the last decade, really, since my early 20s. Is wow, this is not easy, and I don't feel very good, and I'm hungry and tired. But you're working hard when you're young so that you can relax a bit more when you're older. And a lot of people have to work until they can't enjoy life anymore.
Yeah.
And I made the decision that that wasn't going to be me, and I want to be successful, and I want to grow a company that I can be proud of, and that I can create value for my friends and family, and then enjoy life when I still can.
Yeah. I mean, that's a beautiful statement, and I think we can end there. Corey, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate it, Ravi. Great talking to you, and look forward to catching up down the road if you have another episode you want to fill.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.